At a moment when jazz still loomed large in American culture, 1959 was an unusually monumental year. Those 12 months saw the release of 4 great and genre-altering albums: Charles Mingus's Mingus Dave Brubeck's Take 5, Ornette Coleman's The Shape of Jazz to Come, and Miles Davis's Kind of Blue. The genre, though still filled with brilliant talent, has receded to niche status from the culture at large. What remains of that earth-shaking year in jazz? Take 5 has stayed a standard, a tune you might hear on TV or on the radio, a signifier of smooth and nostalgic cool. Mingus, the genius troublemaker, and Coleman, the free jazz pioneer, remain revered by those in the know, but most of the music they made has been forgotten by the broader public. Yet Kind of Blue, arguably the best-selling and best-loved jazz album ever, endures. A record that still has the power to awe, that seems to exist outside of time. Why this album? Out of the thousands of jazz albums ever recorded, why does Kind of Blue maintain its hold on our imaginations more than any other? The simplest response is to say, because it's beautiful. Or perhaps it's the unthreatening nature of the music. 5 medium-tempo selections, all played at the level of human understanding. Kind of Blue was the 5th studio album released on Columbia, and 28th overall, by the American jazz musician, trumpeter, composer, and bandleader Miles Davis. It was recorded on March 2nd and April 22nd, 1959, at Columbia's 30th Street studio in New York City, and released on August 17th of that same year by Columbia Records. Kind of Blue brought together 7 now legendary musicians in the prime of their careers: tenor saxophonist John Coltrane, alto saxophonist Julian Cannonball Adderley, pianists Bill Evans and Wynton Kelly, bassist Paul Chambers, drummer Jimmy Cobb, and of course trumpeter Miles Davis. Influenced in part by Bill Evans, who had joined the ensemble in 1958, Davis departed further from his early hard bop style in favor of greater experimentation, basing Kind of Blue entirely on modality. Modal music is built on scales from each note and differs greatly from the traditional chords and keys, requiring much more melodic invention and, in Davis's case, improvisation. Kind of Blue was recorded on 3-track tape in 2 sessions. On March 2nd, 1959, the tracks So What, Freddie Freeloader, and Blue and Green were recorded for side 1 of the original LP, and on April 22nd, the tracks All Blues and Flamenco Sketches were recorded, making up side 2. The album demonstrated the full possibilities of modal form. So What and All Blues moved. Freddie Freeloader kicked back. Blue and Green and Flamenco Sketches pondered. The liner notes list Davis as author of all compositions, but many scholars and fans believe that Bill Evans wrote part or the whole of Blue and Green and Flamenco Sketches. Bill Evans assumed co-credit with Davis for Blue and Green when recording it on his Portrait and Jazz album and the Davis Estate, acknowledged Evans' authorship in 2002. So What? The opening track begins with mysterious piano chords setting the stage. Unexpectedly, the bass takes on the theme, a phrase that ebbs and flows, followed by the piano chords echoing a questioning "so what?" When played on the piano, these chords feel unresolved, leaving a lingering sensation. The exchange between bass and piano repeats 4 times, then expands to involve all instruments. Following this structured exchange, solos emerge, but what unfolds isn't disjointed or out of tune. Instead, each musician weaves their own melodic tapestry seamlessly, navigating key changes effortlessly. As was Davis's penchant, he called for almost no rehearsal, and the musicians had little idea what they were to record. As described in the original liner notes by pianist Bill Evans, Davis had only given the band sketches of scales and melody lines on which to improvise. Once the musicians were assembled, Davis gave brief instructions for each piece and then set to taping the sextet in studio. While the results were impressive with so little preparation, the persistent legend that the entire album was recorded in one pass is untrue. Only Flamenco Sketches yielded a complete take on the first try. Kind of Blue is regarded by many critics as Davis's masterpiece, the greatest jazz album ever recorded, and one of the best albums of all time. Its impact on music, including jazz, rock, and classical genres, has led writers to also deem it one of the most influential albums ever made. The LP was one of 50 recordings chosen in 2002 by the Library of Congress for the inaugural year of the National Recording Registry, and in 2003, it was ranked number 12 on Rolling Stone magazine's list of the 500 greatest albums of all time. On December 16, 2009, the United States House of Representatives passed a resolution honoring the 50th anniversary of Kind of Blue and reaffirming jazz as a national treasure. It is included in the 2005 book, 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die. In 2019, Kind of Blue was certified 5 times platinum by the Recording Industry Association of America for shipments of at least 5 million copies in the United States. The album's influence has reached beyond jazz, as musicians of such genres as rock and classical have been influenced by it. Pink Floyd keyboardist Richard Wright said that the chord progressions on the album influenced the structure of the introductory chords to the song Breathe on the album The Dark Side of the Moon. Quincy Jones, one of Davis's longtime friends, wrote, "That Kind of Blue will always be my music, man. I play Kind of Blue every day. It's my orange juice. It still sounds like it was made yesterday." Renowned hip-hop artist and rapper Q-Tip reaffirmed the album's reputation and influence when discussing the significance of Kind of Blue, stating, "It's like the Bible. You just have one in your house." Miles Davis and Bill Evans never recorded together again after concluding work on Kind of Blue. Like saxophonists Coltrane and Adderley, the pianist pursued his own path as a leader, forming a trio with bassist Scott LaFaro and drummer Paul Motion that made several landmark studio and live recordings between 1959 and 1961. Many years later, Motion said that the trio was planning to record with Davis, that it was all set up, but that the date fell by the wayside after LaFaro died in a car crash in the summer of 1961. It's intriguing to consider what such a session would have sounded like, bringing together the dynamic interplay of the Evans trio with Davis's restless and endlessly questing musical mind. But the recorded legacy of the trumpeter and the pianist remains confined to an 11-month stretch at the end of the 1950s. Cannonball Adderley fronted popular bands with his brother Nat. Kelly, Chambers, and Cobb continued as a touring unit, recording under Kelly's name as well as in support of Coltrane and Wes Montgomery, among others. And Coltrane went on to become one of the most revered and innovative of all jazz musicians. Even more than Davis, Coltrane took the modal approach and ran with it during his career as a leader in the 1960s. Looking back years later, Evans said, "I suppose that Kind of Blue has been a far-reaching influence. But when we did the album, we had no idea it would become that important. I have wondered for years just what was that special quality. But it is difficult for me as a contributor to be objective about it. Of course, just to record with a band like that was a special experience for me. There was always some kind of magic and conviction with Miles." On Kind of Blue, Miles Davis hit a pinnacle of beauty and cool in jazz that has never been surpassed, and though it is Davis's achievement as a leader, it's impossible to imagine it without the presence of Bill Evans. Since its release on August 17, 1959, Kind of Blue has been regarded by critics as Davis's greatest work. It is his most acclaimed album and became, along with Davis's 1970 album Bitches Brew, his best-selling record, cementing him as one of the most successful jazz artists in history. Late in his life, Davis repeatedly disregarded his earlier work. He said in an interview, "So What, or Kind of Blue, they were done in that era, the right hour, the right day, and it happened. It's over. What I used to play with Bill Evans, all those different modes and substitute chords, we had the energy then and we liked it. But I have no feel for it anymore. It's more like warmed over turkey." This is Danny from One Track Jazz. Thanks for listening. If you would like to know more about Bill Evans, John Coltrane, or Miles Davis, check out the videos in the comments.